It's 8:16. The Times this morning paints a picture of the Liverpool hospital bomber. He was an asylum seeker who had been repeatedly rejected, but he wasn't deported. He converted to Christianity, perhaps out of conviction, or perhaps to try to help him win asylum. He suffered mental health problems, once carrying a knife and threatening to kill himself. As yet, there is no sign that he was part of a larger group. But what can we do to stop people like that becoming terrorists? Liam Duffy is a strategic advisor at Counter Extremism Project and previously worked on the Prevent strategy. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Liam, we've seen a few examples recently of high-profile but lone attacks. So David Amos, for example, who was murdered in his constituency, this alleged Liverpool bomber. If these people are operating on their own, there doesn't seem to be much of a network. How are they being radicalized, do we think?
Well, I think like yourself and many of your listeners will have heard the term lone wolf over the recent years. It's to be honest, it's a term that I try to steer clear from because I think it paints a bit of a misleading picture. I think you can use the term lone actor with some of these cases, like they are acting alone, but they're not necessarily lone wolves. And I think this goes all the way back to Mohamed Marat's attack in Toulouse in the south of France back in 2012. I mean, that was seen as the classic case of the first kind of lone wolf jihadi attack in Europe. But then obviously it transpired later that actually was part of a much bigger physical network operating in the city and surrounding areas. So as much as people might act alone, they're not necessarily lone wolves. And even then, the people who act alone or are radicalized alone, they are actually only a minority when it comes to jihadist terror. So I don't think we should miss the woods for the trees when we see kind of people acting alone and think that actually this entire problem is people acting and being radicalized alone, because that's not actually the case.
Yeah. And what about the religious aspect of this particular case? This is a man who came from the Middle East. Apparently his grandfather was Syrian because they found his passport. The front of the Times today, bomber tried to game the system by claiming he was Christian. He converted to Christianity. Now, I'm sure I don't need to explain to you that if you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, that is a pretty big deal. Have you heard anything like this before in terms of a potential cloak to your kind of desire to commit a terrorist attack?
No, not in that way, to be honest. I mean, it would be interesting if that was. I mean, we've seen with some of the prison attacks or the attacks by people recently released from prison that they're kind of, as you put it, gaming the system, pretending to be de-radicalized and they're not. I've not seen, and I don't know about this case. The only reporting I've seen is in the Times itself this morning about the potential conversion to try and assist with the asylum case. So I don't know about whether that was a kind of foil to obscure his real mission or not, but I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that at this moment.
In terms of the mental health thread that's running through this story, this was a man who had some mental health problems. He'd been sectioned. We talked about that incident with the knife. Her Majesty's Inspectorate has said today that the criminal justice system is failing people who struggle with their mental health. Clearly, there probably does need to be some reform to the mental health system, but if someone was in the system, if they had been sectioned and they were in a centre or an institution and they were displaying radical behaviour or saying things that were perhaps worrying, would that be reported? Would that be caught in the Prevent system?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think Prevent prefers to use the term referrals rather than reporting, because obviously it's quite distinct to the security services and the police. So you would hope, especially now that Prevent's been around for a few years and it's so fully embedded in mental health services, that people would notice these things. But I think it's also important to note that by all accounts, the incidents with mental health, and I think he was sectioned after an incident with a knife. I think that's quite a few years ago. So we've got no idea at this point if he was expressing any radical views or any evidence of extremist ideology back then. So as much as it's part of the picture, I don't think we can charge in at this moment and say that it's definitely connected. And I think, especially, there's a lot of people who obviously deal with mental health problems or get treatment and obviously never go on to do anything like this. So I think it's another case of, waiting a little bit to see just how pivotal the mental health issue is in this case. Yeah.
Yeah. Liam, thank you. Liam Duffy, strategic advisor at Counter Extremism Project, and previously worked on the Prevent strategy.